Hello, I'm Scott Sanders, the City Manager of Des Moines, Iowa. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our city budget and its processes. The engagement that we receive from you and other Des Moines residents is important for developing a budget that best serves our entire community. The feedback that you provide directly shapes the recommended budget that I will give to the council each year. After watching this video presentation, I highly encourage you to stay involved in the budget process. Visit our website, dsm.city/budget, to submit any questions and provide us with feedback. There will also be an opportunity to be in person and talk with our budget staff and myself at every one of the wards over the next couple weeks. I'm really proud of our finance department and the work they do to ensure that we remain a fiscally responsible city, and that we are being good stewards of the taxpayer dollars. We've been recognized for 45 consecutive years by the Government Finance Officers Association for our excellence in financial reporting, and we have a high bond rating that puts us in a competitive advantage against our other cities of similar size. Despite the recent challenges we've seen nationally in the form of inflation and rising costs, we are prepared to weather the storm without any increase to our levy. In fact, we have been able to accomplish a great amount of things just in this recent year. We launched a new, completely free summer camp for our youth as part of our Parks and Rec Department's equity-based service program. We solidified a partnership with Broadlawns Medical Center to place mental health professionals in our police dispatch to better help people directly in crisis. We completed a stormwater master plan to identify weaknesses in our stormwater infrastructure throughout the entire city in an effort to protect our residents from flash flooding. And those are just a couple examples of what we've done recently within our budgets. Now to talk about our city process within the budget, I'd like to introduce you to Nick Shull, our Finance Director.
Thanks, Scott. And as we get into our presentation a little bit more in depth, what we're going to cover today is the budget process and forecasting and what we look at over the course of the next several months and kind of detail what we're actually going to see over the schedule for this upcoming fiscal year that we're going to be approving in March. I'll also cover general terms of the fund structure and how government accounting works. It's a little bit different than what people see in the private sector, as well as what people might do for their personal finances. We're also going to kind of cover the budget overview of the existing budget that we are currently running through on fiscal year 2023 and some of those numbers as how it relates to the services that we provide. As well as we're going to cover the local option and what we've been able to successfully do with local option funds since fiscal year 2020. When we start going into this new fiscal year budget, what the city manager will do is reach out to the departments as well as to council and kind of talk about what those council's strategic priorities are and how that can change our levels of service in that next budget cycle. Those departments take that direction and look at what they can do and what changes they need to do to be able to provide those new products and services. Those requests come in to the finance department and it gets reviewed by a budget review committee. That budget review committee consists of the city manager office, as well as the finance director, myself, and the HR director as well. And that committee will look at those requests through that September to January timeframe to figure out what the priorities are across all departments to see what can actually get incorporated into that city manager's recommended budget for the council to vote on. Over that course of that time, we also try and do things like this video, where we're giving you additional information as to what our process is and ask for input and answer questions as it relates to the budget and what we are spending our dollars on. The internal process starts as early as July, where the finance department starts looking more in depth to the salary projection, as well as that evaluating the history of the revenues and the expenses that we have for those products and services going forward. We take all those different inflation factors and the different projects that we have going on and estimate what we're thinking those future years will look like. As we are putting together those recommended budgets, that the budgets for the different departments, we present the City Council with a workshop. That tends to be at the beginning of February, and what we're trying to do there is give the financial information from each department's perspective and what those costs and revenues are looking like in that next upcoming budget. The council has to hold a couple of public hearings during the course of February and March. There is another slide that kind of talks about that timeline, and so we'll get into those a little bit more in depth further along. The state does require the city to file an annual budget by the end of March every year. So that's what we're working towards in this upcoming timeline. That timeline, as it looks externally, is that time frame between November and the end of March. There's a lot of different items that you're seeing at the council level, as well as the public input as well. The first step that we see as an external date is that November 1. That's where we had that council workshop that talked about the budget timeline and discuss what we would want to do for public outreach and input from our residents. As we go into this video, it shows that that's beginning part of December. And then we're also going to have those listening posts that can expand and have that open conversation with residents as to different questions or inputs that we can receive from those residents. As we go a little bit further, we will put together the more financial tables in our preliminary budget and capital improvement plan books so that we can kind of talk about more in depth the dollars that we're seeing and being expended or received within that budget. As we look at the council meetings in February and March, you can see here that they have to set what's called a max property tax dollar. That notice and hearing really sets a ceiling for the city to adhere to when they go to approve the budget. So it allows for additional transparency and multiple public hearings over the course of that budget process. To go into the fund structure or that government accounting, we're going to talk about funds. What funds are is a grouping of accounts that we maintain to make sure that we're in compliance over what resources that we are collecting and expending for different activities within the government. The city, including the state, county, and other local governments, use that fund accounting to ensure compliance with financial rules as well as federal regulations and state regulations. To get into some of the specific funds that the city has, the most prevalent one that we discuss is general fund. That general fund is our primary operations. So from that, you'll see our activities that deal with police, fire, administrative that deals with the city manager office, IT, accounting, HR type activities, as well as parks. From there, we go into more broader terms, the capital projects. Those accounts deal with the acquisition and construction of multi-year assets. Another fund type that the city has is enterprise funds. Those enterprise funds should be run like a business. So those have to be supported by user fees. Some of those funds are stormwater, sanitary, and refuse. So refuse is our trash collection. So those user fees support the cost to provide those services. As we go into the last couple fund types that are unique to federal, state, and local governments. We'll go into the special revenue funds. Specifically, the newest one of those that we have is the local option sales and service tax. So that is a special source of funds that has to be spent a particular way. Another one that's unique is that internal service. That internal service funds are very similar to the enterprise accounts, but they are businesses that are providing services to the rest of the departments within the government. So a good example of that is our fleet division, where they are actually providing vehicle purchasing as well as maintenance to those vehicles over the course of the year. The last fund I'm going to talk about is our debt service. It relates to our capital projects. It allows us to pay the long-term debt associated to those capital projects that we talked about a little bit ago. As we look more in depth to the general fund revenues, you can see from this chart for the current fiscal year 2023, property tax revenue makes up the largest percentage at 59%. The next highest is the fees and charges for service. Those are fees that are directly associated with that product or service that the city is providing. Some examples of those would be the permit fees as well as ambulance charges that we have at the city. Beyond that, there is some fines, franchise fees, hotel motel tax, and the unique one that's called intergovernmental. Intergovernmental are funds that we receive from other governmental entities. Example would be federal, state, county revenue that the city would receive. As we look at property tax specifically, there needs to be an explanation as to the timeline that you're really looking at. There is a long assessment cycle. There is an 18-month lag from start to finish. As we look at this budget for fiscal year 2024, we are actually looking at evaluation for 1/1/2022. So that is our evaluation. That gives us the payment for September of 2023 and March of 2024. So from that standpoint, there is a lot of timing difference from what we're working on. As we look at recent news on assessment values, that is dealing with this upcoming valuation of 1/1/2023. So based off that, that is going to be not this year's budget cycle that we're looking at, but next year's budget cycle. So as we look at this year, it should be fairly similar to the assessment that was in the prior year for fiscal year 2023 to 2024. As we look closer to property taxes for fiscal year 2023, every dollar that was paid back in September and what will be paid in March is broken out this way. You can see that the city of Des Moines makes up just over 38 cents of that dollar. The next largest is obviously the Des Moines Public Schools at over 35 cents of it, and Polk County at about 16 cents. As we look at the property taxes specific to the city of Des Moines, that breakout of that 38 cents goes 4 different ways. Our general levy that goes into the general fund, the self-insurance that we have for the costs of our liabilities and insurance, as well as employee benefits as it relates to FICA, IPERS, police and fire, and other employee benefits. That, if I refer back to the different funds, goes into a special revenue fund. We also have the debt service piece that correlates within that 38 cents. Again, as we refer back, that pays that principal and interest for what we have been paying on those prior capital projects that we've issued the debt for. As we look at the property taxes of an assessed value for a $100,000 home, when we're looking at fiscal year 2023, that $100,000 home is not taxed at that full assessed value. The state has a rollback. What that does is it allows for only a certain percentage of residential homes to be taxed at a certain percentage. What fiscal year 2023's taxable valuation was based off of just over that 54%. So as you can see, a $100,000 home will only be taxed at that $54,000. That comes out to just under $2,500 as an annual tax bill. Again, the only portion that actually goes to the city is about $900 for the entire year. If you look at it from a monthly standpoint, that's $75 a month. As you look at that at $150,000 assessed value, it's proportionate as you look at this. So you can see that $50,000 difference of assessed value is a difference of $75 a month to $112 a month. As we look at fiscal year 2023 general fund expenses, you can see the largest expense is our salaries for our employees to provide those services. The next is our contracted services. Those are going to be ones that we pay different companies for services, as well as what we pay out for hotel motel to our community groups of Bravo and CVB. As we look at general fund expenses a little bit differently and look at it by department, you can see public safety represents 61%, which is our police and fire. Beyond that, our next percentage is admin services. Those services are the ones that help all of the departments, like city clerk, city manager, finance, human resources, civil human rights, IT, and different things like that. As we look at services provided, if we're looking at the governmental funds, this is our general fund and some of the special revenue accounts. This kind of summarizes some of the services that we provide to our residents. As we look more specifically at some of the other operations that we have beyond those governmental, we do have the enterprise, special revenue, internal service funds as well. So just to kind of give you an idea of some of those enterprise funds, like sanitary sewer cost is about $48 million. The storm is about $44 million, and solid waste is about $28 million. As we look at these a little bit more in depth, we have other services provided within those operations. As we move on to capital improvement plan expenditures, you can see we have two major categories, the tax supported and our enterprise funds. You can see from here our budget in 22 through the plan years of 2026, our dollar amounts vary from year to year. We can look into that a lot more in depth if you look at our capital improvement plan book that was approved in March to see what projects fall under these categories. The large difference in 22 versus any of the other years is that carryover of funds from one fiscal year to the next. Because our construction seasons go through the fiscal year that ends June 30th, there's a lot of funds that get carried on into that next fiscal year. As you can see from this graph, our historical trends, you can see that we do have a very large peak of expenses with that carryover amount, as well as our 2023 budget is a very large dollar amount, even without possible carryover coming in this next CIP plan. That correlates from both the enterprise, which is the orange line, as well as our tax supported, which is that blue. If we break those into tax supported categories, the largest investment that the city does is that streets at 50%. From there, the next area that we are talking about is that municipal buildings and parks and recreation. How we pay for those tax supported activities is from a very wide range of sources. Our largest component obviously is our general obligation bonds. Those are ones that, as I talked about earlier, was that debt service payments on principal and interest that we're paying towards these projects. Some of the other items that we have in there is local option sales tax, where we've got a large amount of funds coming in for street improvements as well. If you would like to see more information, please look at our CIP document that was approved in March. Our last topic for this video is local option. We have really been able to look at providing additional relief and services with local option. As we look at the numbers going forward, you'll be able to see some of the major programs that we've been able to do, as well as a lot of property tax relief. 50% of local option goes to property tax relief. For fiscal year 22, that equated to just over $32.7 million. In fiscal year 2020, we did drop our property tax rate 60 cents. And then in the following year, we did drop it another 3 cents to bring our tax rate down to $16.61, despite the large amount of investment that the city has done for our capital projects. As we look at this chart, this shows the difference between what our property tax rate would have had to been based off of the capital projects that we've done. As you can see, starting in fiscal year 2020, that difference is at $1.02, all the way up to this current fiscal year of $2.39. So that has been a significant savings on our property tax rate over the course of that 4 years of local option. The remaining 50% of local option goes to these three categories: street improvements and flood prevention, neighborhood improvements, and public safety improvements and expenditures. As we look closer at street improvements and flood prevention, what we invested in fiscal year 22 is $5 million in street improvements, $1 million in stormwater improvements, and almost $1 million in flood prevention buyouts. As we look at neighborhood improvements, there was a large increase from 21 to 22 of over $10 million. There's a lot of different activities that we do within this neighborhood improvement that covers things like Blitz on Blight, expanded library hours, and even some of our enhanced tree care. If you would like to look at additional information on these neighborhood programs, please refer to our local option report on dsm.city/budget. As we look at public safety improvements and expenditures, we have costs that relate to firefighters, public safety, dispatcher positions, mobile crisis partnerships, as well as body-worn cameras for our police. The last topic I want to cover is reserves. We have a designated reserve, which are funds that we keep aside for specific programs that allow them to carry those funds from year to year. The financial reserve is funds that we have that don't go to a particular program, but allows us to put money aside to cover unexpected expenses or unexpected decreases in revenues as we go forward through the local option. And as that was my last topic, if you would like to reach out to the finance department with questions or comments, don't forget to go to dsm.city/budget to give us your input and ask questions. With that, I'll hand it back to you, Scott.
Well, thank you, Nick, for explaining to all of us how the budgets work at the city. I know that it takes an enormous amount of time to put together all the estimates for the services we provide, the costs that are associated with that. But we want to make sure we're actually providing the right services to our residents, and that's where you come in. As our residents, we want to keep you involved in the budget process. I strongly encourage you to visit our dsm.city/budget website and share your thoughts and priorities with us. We only know that we're providing the right services if you respond and participate. There's also that opportunity to come in person with our listening posts. Those will be in each of the wards. Those dates are provided on our website as well. So again, thank you for participating, and please stay involved.